I once had a man text me asking me if he owed it to his wife to stay. And my response to him was, no, you don't. Because staying just out of obligation is a breeding ground for resentment and ultimately a miserable marriage. But I didn't stop there. I followed up with 7 things that he did owe his spouse. The first thing that you owe your spouse is transparency. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to tell them every thought in your mind. Please don't. It doesn't mean that you have to be a complete and total open book. But it also means that you don't hide things from them that would be important to them. It means that if they ask you how you're doing, you don't just respond with fine if you're not okay. It means that you share your joys, your successes, and you also share your fears and your disappointments. It means that if you're not happy, you say so. So you do owe it to your spouse to be open and transparent. You owe it to your spouse to take responsibility, not for them, not for their well-being, but for your own. Because that is your job, to put your happiness in the hands of your partner. Not a good idea. Not only will you be disappointed every single time, but it's not fair to them because it's asking them to do something that they cannot do. So you need to take responsibility for your own well-being. You also need to take responsibility for your own emotions. If there are situations that you're sensitive about because of your own past, that's on you. You can ask them to be understanding. You can ask them to be patient, but ultimately fixing it is your job. So take responsibility. You owe it to your spouse to approach the marriage with energy. Because if you don't give energy to something, it's going to fizzle and die. If all of your attentions are focused in other directions, whether that be another person, that could be the children, it could be your work. But if all of your attention is focused elsewhere, how in the world can you expect your marriage to thrive? Now, of course, there's going to be times of ebb and flow. There's going to be situations where you have to put energy other places. You know, I've got several friends right now that have newborns or soon to be newborns. You know, those little babies are going to take a lot of time and attention. But that doesn't mean that you just let that be that way for the long term. You put in that time and attention elsewhere while you need to, and then you shift it back when you can. So you definitely owe your spouse your energy and attention. You owe your spouse fidelity. Now, if you are in a monogamous relationship where that is the agreement, then that's what fidelity means. Or if your relationship has different ground rules, fine, but then that's what fidelity means. Fidelity also extends to financial honesty. It means that you don't hide purchases from your partner. You don't hide debts. You don't hide windfalls. It means that you're honest, that you are trustworthy, that you're following through with what you said you would do, and that you basically behave with integrity. So yeah, fidelity is something that you owe your spouse. On the other hand, you also owe your spouse liberty. In other words, they need to have freedom to be themselves, to have their own thoughts, to make their own decisions. And yeah, you deserve that liberty too. That old adage about marriage being a ball and chain, it certainly should not be. Because if that's the case, nobody's ever going to be happy. So you need to give your partner the freedom for them to grow and to change and to be their own person. You don't own them, but you do owe them their own liberty. You owe your partner your empathy. And that seems sort of self-evident. You know, if this is somebody that you love, of course you're going to take the time to put yourself in their shoes. But sometimes we don't do that, especially after we've been together for a while. You know, you've been in a relationship for a while, you sort of assume that the other person feels like you. And that's not necessarily the case. So take the time to listen. Take the time to really hear their responses and to appreciate them as a separate person. And take the ego out of it. And just let yourself, put yourself in their shoes and just see things as they see things. Sometimes that can be hard. Sometimes that means taking a harsh look at yourself or at a situation that maybe you perceive differently. But that's okay. Because one of the biggest things that marriage is about is developing empathy for other people. And then finally, the last thing that you owe your spouse is civility. No matter how angry you are, no matter how much of a jerk they might be acting in the moment, be kind. There's no excuse for anything else. So those are the 7 things that you owe your spouse. Notice that staying isn't one of them. But if you do need to leave, make sure you do so with kindness and authenticity.